me. Is it this?
Yeah.
Oh, we're live. Happy Halloween.
Yay! Happy Halloween.
And happy birthday.
So true.
Oh, I was
What
like,
if
whose
this-
birthday is it? Oh, it's Halloween.
It's the scariest day of the year, everybody. But not.
So was Talk to the Entities created on this day 15 years ago?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. That is hilarious.
Yeah. So yeah, if you had been listening to some of the earlier ones that started like in the middle of the night for me, Shannon was talking about how they looked in the archives and her first intro was 15 years ago. And I think I was there because I went to all of her beginning Talk to the Entities things because I always thought it was cool. I know a lot of people get weirded out and creeped out by this. And she even talked about like she didn't want to be weird, but I always thought it was so cool that you could communicate with spirits. And what about you guys?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to ask you, like, how did you like roll into this? Like, how did you find Shannon? How did you find like Talk to the Entities?
Well, I started Access at the end of 2003. And in my first foundation, there was a few of the tools of Talk to the Entities. And Shannon was at, the big classes like the COPs and the 7 days. And at a certain point, Gary was like pushing her, like, talk to the entities. You should talk to the entities. So she started doing intros. And I was so interested and so enthusiastic about the possibilities.
I love that.
How about you?
Yeah, well, honestly, for me, like the foundation also, so I did my first foundation and we talked about the entities on day 2. And it was still back in the days when there were like 2 weekend classes. So then there was like this 1 week or 2, whenever you would take like level 1 was whenever you would take it.
Right.
So it wasn't necessarily right after, but I went home that night with this book in which there was like these entity tools, and entities started showing up at a friend's place. And I was just like, I have no clue what I'm doing, but like, I got this book. I got some tools that I learned. Let's start playing with it. And that was literally how it just started. And it never stopped after.
Yeah. What about you, Amy?
Well, obviously I heard about Talk to the Entities in my first foundation class. But I actually was at 2 and 3 at the time in Sweden with Dane, and Shannon was doing an intro, like a taster to Talk to the Entities, and I attended that. But and I was really interested, and I knew I had capacities with entities, but I really didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to open that box. I had put that box in the corner a long time ago. So it took me years to be able to finally educate myself about the spirit world and Talk to the Entity classes and actually use the tools. But I do remember in that first COP 2 and 3 with Dane, he actually cleared me on being a walk-in. And that actually gave me a lot of clarity. And he actually called me Entity Girl in that class. And I was so disgusted. I was like, I don't want to be anything else. So, and I think we're going to talk about walk-ins today as well. But that a lot of the tools that gave me a lot of space in any of the access classes were actually Talk to the Entity tools.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. Early on in using the tools, my father-in-law at the time had a heart attack and survived. But after he came back from the hospital, he was like a different person. And he, even though he knew pretty much everybody, he didn't recognize me. And I remember like thinking, this is really interesting. He sat in a different chair than he always sat in his one chair. And this time he sits on the sofa. He was very affectionate with his wife before he was not. He liked dark chocolate now, whereas before he was a vanilla person. And it was so clear that it was a different being.
Wow.
And to me, like looking at that with the tools and the ability to know, oh, wow, this is a different being. Like it gave me such this peace and relaxation with it. Whereas the other people in the family were like freaking out. Like, why is he acting so weird? And why is he so different? Except my mother-in-law actually liked this new being better. Because he was more affectionate and he was kinder. So it's not always a bad thing, and just acknowledging what is gives you a level of peace that nothing else can.
Wow.
Yeah, I love that. So a lot of people think walk-ins is like something really bad and they don't want to look at that topic. But actually, you just said it's not always a bad thing. From what I've seen in facilitating people through the years and in my own experiences, walk-ins always was something that created greater for me and for others. And it's actually it's a topic that gave me a lot of clarity around my life, like realizing that like things that I thought were mine or my experiences actually weren't. They were actually another being. And even changes that I went through in my own life, realizing like different awarenesses around, was that really me or was that another being, was another walk-in? And if you're curious, like what the hell are we talking about walk-ins? It's actually, there's a chapter about it in Shannon's book, To The Entities, called Changing of the Guard. And that's a really interesting perspective of walk-ins as well. And Shannon even demonstrates how it created greater for her and the world when she also became a walk-in. What's been your experience with walk-ins, Yaso?
Well, like the first time I heard it in foundation, like I just got kind of excited about it. I was like, ooh, what's that? Like, how does it work? And I remember that I just started asking, well, the only way to find out is starting to work with this. So like, how do you get to learn about this is to start asking people to show up. And so I started asking for like, okay, what will it take for people to show up that we can play with this topic? And so at that time I was doing like some SE work and body work and stuff like that. So I would go do classes and sessions. And what started showing up was all this kind of people that had been in like horrible car crashes, like in all this kind of like disastrous ways of like creating like kind of magic with their bodies because they were still there, but then not getting out of like trouble with their bodies because there was something not acknowledged on the level of being. And I've been massively like for a year, I think, just like inviting myself to be like, okay, if I literally know nothing yet about what's possible with this, like what can I find out? And still today, I think it's one of the most exciting topics because like you never know where or what choice a person has been making. And like most of the times they have never had anybody ask them like, hey, what choice did you make right there? What's going on? And so when they start to become more conscious and they start also to include that awareness in all beings, it's this, wow, totally like, I don't even like really get how people can work on bodies and then not notice. Kind of, it makes things so complicated and incomplete. So, yeah, and also in my personal life, a lot of like awareness on like exactly how people change, sometimes for the good, sometimes for like the bad. So you cannot hold on to a relationship or the relationship change, but then the other person that you're in a relationship with, family relationship or whatever, like kind of still requires you to keep on playing that role. And that, like what you just said, Julie, like that level of peace that shows up once you actually put the finger on like, oh, that's what's going on. Okay, now what can we create?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Also, I just wanted to say, like for me, one of the gifts of walk-ins too is like letting the body doesn't have to die. Like you don't have to kill the body. Like if the being doesn't want to be here anymore, you don't actually have to kill the body. Another being can come in, and the being that doesn't want to be here can move on. So to me, it's like it's a gift. It's a gift to the planet. It's a gift to the bodies still get to thrive. And if the being doesn't want to be here, it's such a gift to be able to say like, hey, you don't have to be here. You can move on, and another being can come in. And then with the Talk to the Entity tools to actually facilitate that with consciousness so the beings don't get stuck. To me, like that's amazing. Imagine if we all could like live in the world where we had that choice,
yeah, where somebody had our back to help us with that, right? Because
Yeah.
that's also the thing. It's like sometimes because it's so kind of, we're so, I don't know how it is for you, but like I've seen myself and others also that I work with, we're so attached often like to our identity also that like even getting total clarity, like, okay, does this belong to really me? Am I going to take it with me? Am I going to like leave it here? Who does this? Like, it's sometimes like harder, I think, than when it's like about somebody else. Well, it might be about somebody else, but it's just in your body.
Yeah. And that whole, like, I think you were saying, Amy, about the committee in your head with the different beings in there. I had a friend who was just visiting, and she was like, I can't remember anything from my childhood before I was 5. And I said, so are you a walk-in? And she said, yes. What's that? Because usually if you can ask somebody like without having to explain it, they'll know. And so I told her a little bit about it, and then I cleared the original occupant, and she was like, oh my God, my head is clear and empty for the first time.
Wow.
So it can be such a gift, even if people don't even know what access consciousness or talk to the entities is. We can still share bits and pieces and create that peace for people.
So if people are watching this today and are like, what the hell are these people talking about? Like, what would be like, so if we could be like, okay, what are some signs that you or someone else may be a walk-in? I think we already said a few. Like Julie said, like finding like it's hard to make a decision. There's 100 different voices in your head. And the second one you said was you can't remember any of your childhood. What else?
Changed, she also said, like how somebody like her father-in-law, I think, like changed completely, like, you know, and everybody will usually say it like, oh my God, it's such a different person after the heart attack. Yeah, it is a different person.
It really
is. Yeah. Anything else?
It could also be any kind of operation or any kind of experience where it's traumatic and you think, oh my God, I'm going to die. That kind of a thing.
Yeah. And so then, okay, if someone kind of starts to identify, maybe I'm a walk-in or maybe someone I know is a walk-in, what do they do with it then? What's some tools they could use then with getting clarity around that?
Well, I would say like it usually takes like if you really, really want to change it and like kind of like sort out which being is going to stay, which one is going to go. Usually rule number 1 is the one who at first wanted to leave the party, like let them go, let them leave the party. And then I've also worked with some people that were actually the ones who could like deal with life were not necessarily the one who were about to leave the party first. So it's like sorting out, I would say, like who's going to stay and like run the body.
Getting organized.
Getting organized.
So guys, for any of you who are wondering, like this isn't the foundation class. If you want more like facilitation around it, the Talk to the Entity beginning class is a great place to go. And you can also like get a session with Talk to the Entity facilitator who can walk you through that process. But even just having this information. Sorry?
Walking classes. And honestly, I heard Shannon's like teleseries is on a 15% discount, I think, like coming 24 hours. And that class has really like given so much information, I think, to like most people that have bought it. So
yeah, it's a 3-part series and it does really give you a lot of information about walk-ins if you are still a little bit confused, which it took me a long time to really get clarity around walk-ins.
Yeah.
What else? And we were also going to talk about beings of light. One of my favorite things about Talk to the Entities, and that edition, that class is amazing. But she's also created this book, Beings of Light. And I actually just facilitated a foundation a few weeks ago and had this book available. And one of the people bought the book, came in the next day and was like, oh my God, the space that opened up from the class, but also reading the book, she was just blown away. And the other person in the class was like, well, what was that? And she's like, you're gonna have to read the book to find out.
Were you going to read a little piece from the Beings of Light, Julie?
I don't remember if I had a spot to.
Okay, I put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
I could just open it and.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Open it and pick a line.
Okay. Receive more now. Open more and sense great presence of energy. Don't be scared, be enthusiastic. Or be scared and also be enthusiastic. Open even more and let go of some control. And it's like every single word has this energy to it that just allows you to do just that, to be just that. It's a potent little book.
Yeah. That book is the reason I became a Talk to the Entity Facilitator. I sat outside my house during COVID one day and sat in the sun and read that book, and all the beings were like in my face, just like tickling me and like going, it's time. You need to go to Talk to the Entities Facilitators. I was like, I can't, it's too much money. I want to go to everything else with you. And they were like, nope, you're doing it. And I was like, okay. And it was so clear. And since I've started to, I would say that beings of light have always been with me, and I'm sure they've always been with you all as well, especially as a child. When you have that like curiosity and fun and play, like you have that natural communion with all beings. And then I think over time we lose it with our control and our mind and our judgments. But I know that since I started to include, like, it's funny, when I was rejecting my spirit awareness and didn't want to deal with it because I thought it was too heavy and too ugly and too drama, that then I actually was excluding the spirits of the earth and the beings of light. And when I started to like say yes to the spirit world and include all the spirit world, including the heavy, dense, yucky ones, the spirits of the earth and the beings of light became so much more available to me. And I got to receive it all. So it's like all of the spirit world, not just, because I know some people are like, I only want to deal with teammates and I only want to deal with beings of light. But I'm like, no, it's all of it. It's like when you say yes to all of it, they become so present in your life. And it's like the softness, like the gentleness, the whisper.
Yeah, no mind. I remember like when Shannon did like the first 1 day Beings of Light class in Vienna, like many years ago. I chose it because I was there, so I was like, okay, I'll choose it. I'll just stay an extra day. And I was so much control and so like little receiving that from that whole, because it was basically a whole day of exercises. And I was just like, okay, well. And then after I think 2 or 3 years, like there was the next class, and that was such a different paradigm where I was like, oh, wait a minute, I have to re-listen that first class. And that's so incredible with these big beings. Think like if you're not in a state where you're willing to open up, it might be that it makes not much sense yet, but then like don't give up. I think that's also what she writes about in the Beings of Light book. I really love the humor that she uses, in which she also describes her pathway and then like her sister Grace, how that was so different with receiving. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's even hard to talk about the beings of light because it's like not something you can even talk about. It's something you really just have to, like you said, let go of control and relax and receive.
Exercise. You have to exercise it.
Yeah. And like not try to define what it is, and yet be curious and open. And like when I am in the presence of another, I guess, being of light that I never thought was a being of light, to acknowledge, oh, wow, like that energy, that sparkle on the ocean is different than just sparkle on the ocean, that there's something else there. And when you acknowledge it, it gives you this whole other depth of presence and peace that, including the beings, all beings, adds to your life.
Yeah, and it really is that muscle of just asking to, for me, like even if my mind thinks this is stupid and nothing's working and whatever your head tells you, I just ask like, hey, beings of light, can you support me today? Can you increase your presence around me? Can you contribute to me? What can I contribute to you? Like, just even asking those questions. And even that for me too, with my teammates and with the spirits of the art, like the more I just ask and get curious and engage, the greater their presence grows around me. And that's the world I want to live in.
Awesome.
We're on top of the hour.
This was fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. It was really fun.
See you
Bye.
soon.
Happy Halloween, everyone. Bye.